In this video, I'll go over how to run a private LAN access only instance of Vault Warden on a Synology NAS using Docker Compose. Along with Vault Warden, the setup I'll go over will spin up a Caddy web server that is linked to a Duck DNS domain name that we'll use to access Vault Warden and will allow for the use of a Let's Encrypt certificate as well. Note also, because Synology NASs already use ports 80 and 443 by default, the setup I'll cover will use custom port numbers, as you already see in the example URL that I have listed here on screen. To streamline the process, I've created a GitHub repository that can be cloned to provide most of the configuration files that you'll need to spin up the required Docker containers. The repository also includes links to resources that I found helpful and written instructions that I'm using to create this video. I'll also leave a link to the GitHub repository along with the links that I referenced in the description below. Let's get started with the setup, and I'll begin by bringing up the package center where I'll first install Docker. Then, when done, I'll install the Git server and click Run to start up the server. Next, I'll bring up Control Panel, Terminal and SNMP, and enable the SSH service because we'll need to SSH into our Synology NAS to do some setup. Now I'll SSH into my Synology NAS, cd into the /volume1/docker directory, and issue this git command to clone the GitHub repo that I set up for this video. Next, I'll change into the directory that was created and create additional subdirectories that are needed for this setup. I'll then bring up the Duck DNS website, sign in with my Google account, set up a Duck DNS subdomain I'd like to use, then click Add Domain. Next, I'll change the IP address to the internal IP address of my Synology NAS, then click Update IP. Also, make note of the token that has been assigned to your account, which will be used a little later in the setup. Next, I'll bring up the Caddy web server download page, change the platform to Linux AMD 64, select the Caddy DNS module for Duck DNS, then click on Download. Now, I'll switch back over to DSM, bring up File Station, then open the synology-private-vaultwarden subdirectory that the git clone command created. Here I'll select Upload and upload the Caddy DNS module that was just downloaded. Next, I'll select the file, then from the Action menu, select Rename and change the name to just Caddy, then click OK. I'll then switch back to my SSH connection, then run this ls command to confirm the permissions are set properly for the Caddy file, which is the case in my setup. If the execute permissions aren't set properly for you, then run this command to make the Caddy file executable. Next, you'll need to edit the .env file and change the variables to what is appropriate to your setup. In my case, I'm using ports 8080 and 8443 as the HTTP and HTTPS ports that the host Synology NAS uses to connect to the Caddy web server that I'll be running. I'll then enter in my Duck DNS subdomain, enter in an email address I'd like to use for Let's Encrypt communication, and enter in my Duck DNS token that I made note of earlier, then save the changes. At this point, I can start up the Docker containers using this Docker Compose command. And after the Vault Warden and Caddy images are pulled and the containers are created, Vault Warden should be up and running. Now I'll bring up another browser tab, connect to the Duck DNS subdomain that was set up earlier over HTTPS using the custom port number, and we can see that the Vault Warden instance is up and running. I can now create a new account and log in and start making use of the private instance of Vault Warden. To learn more about Vault Warden, you can check out the Vault Warden wiki, which I'll link to in the description below, and Check out my previous video on Vault Warden as well. Lastly, if you'd like to support my work, check out the Support This Channel section in the description below. Thanks so much for watching.